Hey guys, hope you're having a good Sunday so far. It's good to be back with you today and just have another lesson. Again, we're going to continue to look at leaders in the Bible today. We're going to finish up as we've gone through sort of in the biblical order following. So we started out in Genesis, went through some of the Old Testament leaders who we could learn from, and then today we're going to get into the New Testament, and we'll continue to go sort of through them the way the Bible does and through chronologically, and yet in a lot of ways we're going to get to Jesus, and he's not going to be the last leader we look at, but he will be the one that we'll want to go back to and sort of look at how does he model leadership, because again, if he is the example that we're supposed to be following, he's going to be the one that we will really want to learn from when it comes to leadership. But again, we can learn some good traits and some good pursuits of leaders as we look at being Christian leaders. And again, when I'm talking about Christian leaders, this doesn't mean people who are in charge necessarily of the church, or I'm not telling you that this is for people who are leading the youth group as in terms of roles or anything like that. You can be an employee, you can be a follower, or you can be any aspect in that spectrum, and you can still be a leader of people, and these are the attributes that you want to be modeling to that. And so we're going to start today with John the Baptist. If you know John the Baptist, he's the one who came right before Jesus was starting his ministry. He started to prepare the way. And what we learned from John the Baptist is that Christian leaders are going to be ones who are willing to call out people who are faking it, who are phonies. We see at one point a leader in the Sanhedrin come out to John the Baptist to ask to be baptized, and this would have been, in terms of worldly perspective, a really big boost to John's ministry. And yet he calls this person out and he says, "You come from a brood of vipers." And he refuses to baptize him because he knows that this is not a real repentance. And so leaders aren't willing to buckle under the pressure of sort of what is the expectation. And they're going to really call out things that aren't true. They're not going to let that things slide. They're not going to make excuses for other people. They're going to call out the people that need to be called out. And again, the goal with John the Baptist was not just to embarrass this guy. It's to help him realize that he had a need for real repentance and a need for a real relationship, as opposed to just this fake thing that was going on. And then that leads us to Jesus as a leader. And when we look at Jesus, I think most of you would be able to say what is the leadership style and the leadership tactic that he employs that we want to emulate, and that is that Jesus was a servant. We see that time and again. I think of the foot washing ceremony in particular, where he was willing to do what no one else wanted to do to serve his disciples. That was not the role that they would have expected him to fill, and yet he was wanting to serve them and lead them in that way, so that they knew as they went out and pursued his ministry and pursued glorifying God, they would know that a leader serves other people. He is not aloof, he is not separated, and yet he's in there serving alongside of and serving the people that he is leading. Okay, we'll get back to Jesus and looking just a little bit more at that, but I also wanted to look at Peter. What do we know about Peter? Man, he liked to talk. Sometimes he said the right thing, sometimes he said the wrong thing, but it always seemed like Peter was talking. And at one point he answers so correctly that Jesus says, "Good job, you're doing great. That truth that you're speaking is what we're going to build the church on." And then just a couple chapters later, we see him fail so utterly and completely that right after he had promised Jesus that he would never deny him, he goes and denies him 3 times, trying to save his own life. He's scared of the consequences. As a person, as a leader, as a Christian, I feel like that would have been really, really damaging to his mental state, to then realize, oh no, I was a leader, I was trying to follow Jesus, and I went and betrayed him and denounced him and all these things, and it would be really hard to come back from that. But Peter shows us that as a Christian leader, we're all going to fail. We're all going to make mistakes. And yet a Christian leader is one who's able to recover from those failures. He was able to come back and continue to have not only a ministry, a very fruitful ministry. He spread the word to many people. He loved, he led. He started the church in a lot of ways, and so we look at Peter and say, man, he went from complete failure where he had completely denied and abandoned Christ to leading the church in this new thing that was Christianity. And then the last person we're going to look at is Paul. And I think the thing that we most see from Paul is just that leaders are passionate about the things that they are involved in, that they are leading. You're not going to be an effective leader if you're not passionate and excited about the things that you're doing and that you're leading your people to. If you're going to want to be a powerful impact for change, you need to be passionate about it. And we see that in Paul. His letters, I love Paul, and his writings are some of my favorite. And yet as you read Paul, you realize that he just rambles and rambles and rambles, and he doesn't really end sentences all that well. And I think a lot of that comes from he just had so much passion for what he was talking about that he wanted to get as many words out on the page as he could. And I just think he couldn't even stop with the pen, and he just needed to get everything out. And so we see that in his writing, but we also see that in his life. He was imprisoned, he was beaten, he was persecuted time and time again. And as soon as he was able, even in the midst of all of those things, he was able to continue to lead people, to continue to serve and love God. And that was because of his passion, right? He talks about how he is looking forward to death because to die is gain. And yet he was so passionate about bringing people to Christ that we also see him say that he would give up his own salvation if he could bring other people to Christ. And I know that that's a really intense thing to say. There was a lot of passion there. And so as we have looked at all of these different leaders, we've seen that a Christian leader does what's right even if they are alone. That was Noah. He was willing to build the ark even though no one else was listening to God, and he was the only one considered righteous. Abraham showed us that leaders embrace the unknown. He was willing to step out of the comfort of his home and follow where God was leading. Joseph was showing us that leaders endure in spite of their circumstances. He went from slavery to prison to all these different things, and he continued to lead in those and grow and lead people to know more about God, and actually led the Israelites to safety in the end, right? He was the one that allowed Israel to survive the famine. Moses, we see that leaders stick up for the people. Moses was willing to lose a lot of his comfort and a lot of his security by sticking up for the people. He did that with God and with Pharaoh. Joshua led by example. If you remember, he says, you now have a choice as we enter Israel. You can either follow the God who has saved us, or you may follow the gods here from the Philistines and the Moabites and all those. And Joshua says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So he led by example. David showed us that leaders aren't afraid of giants. They're willing to overcome challenges, and they're willing to put their trust in God. We saw that Isaiah rose to the occasion. When God needed someone to do something, Isaiah was willing to step up, and he said, here, Lord, send me. Here I am. Daniel, we see that leaders maintain their resolve without regard for the consequences. He risked his life a couple different times in his desire to be a leader for the people and to be a follower of Jesus. Then again, today, we see that John the Baptist, that leaders aren't afraid to call out fakers and phonies. Jesus led through service. Peter was able to come back from failure, and Paul led through passion. But again, Jesus is the one that I just wanted to end with and encourage us on. As we look at being leaders, all these other things are good. They're all an aspect of leadership. But the thing that differentiates us from the rest of the world is that we follow Jesus's example and we serve other people. A lot of those other ones, you could go to a motivational speaker seminar and get, face your giants and come back from failures. And those are all true. And I think there's a lot of biblical truth in those. Not often will you go to a motivational speaker that says, really try hard to serve others and put yourself lower so that you can raise others up. And that's really what we see Jesus do. He lowered himself to humanity. He sacrificed or emptied himself, and he lost some of that, not lost, he gave up that divinity for a time so that he could become one of us, as low as a human, so that he could raise us up into reunion and fellowship with himself and God the Father. And so it's with that we end, just a look at Jesus and encouragement that as we come back into all these different areas, that we can really serve other people. Thanks. And I will be seeing you guys in person maybe sooner as opposed to later. So looking forward to that. Have a great day.